Up, Tim Lewis. Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes and talk about the Civil Rights Foundation. And I want to start by showing this little video. Sorry about the audio.
It's okay.
Technology works some days and some days it doesn't.
Yes, don't we know?
If a picture's worth 1,000 words, you're still well ahead of the curve on words then.
Well, thank you very much. I have with me several of the board members from the Civil Rights Foundation, Dr. Gigi, Dr. Nash, Samara, and Rebecca, and Reverend Steele. So
Loretta?
we're glad to be here. We've been working for a number of years on helping to showcase Tuscaloosa's civil rights history. Quite often it's a history that hadn't been told, stories that hadn't been told. But when we started working on this, we wanted to tell those stories, we wanted to capture those stories before some of these civil rights icons passed away. And so we've been working on that for the last several years. One of the things that we've recognized over the last several years is civil rights tours and tourism has become a big deal. I mean, literally, people are taking civil rights tours all across the country. And it's big business. However, we don't see a lot of people coming to Tuscaloosa to talk to us or to visit our location, even though we have great stories to tell. So what's the future look like for Tuscaloosa? The future we envision as a foundation is having over 60,000 tourists come each year to Tuscaloosa to visit these destinations that we're creating, to stay overnight, and to spend money on food and entertainment. We want to see K-12 students studying civil rights, specifically civil rights as it relates to Tuscaloosa year-round. And we also want to see Tuscaloosa listed as one of the top 10 civil rights destinations in the Southeast. And we're well on our way to making that happen. We're currently building capacity, looking for funding, staffing, and relationships. We're already promoting tourism. We're already telling people about Tuscaloosa. You have in front of you a brochure. We've given out almost 10,000 of these in the last 3 years. As people come through, we have them at visitors' locations around the state. So we are already getting the word out to tell people they need to stop in and see us in Tuscaloosa. We've already started with developing the curriculum. Dr. Gigi and some others have been working for the last 2 years with the school district. We've already piloted and started doing training and teaching for the curriculum in schools, not only in Tuscaloosa, but in other parts of the state. And we're in the process of expanding our trail. We currently have 18 sites, and we're looking to expand that to twice as many sites. It includes sites at Stillman and on the University of Alabama campus. But the big thing that we're doing is we want to build a civil rights museum. It doesn't do us any good to have all of this information and not have a place for people to go to. People want destinations to go to. In order for us to attract these 60,000 tourists, we need a place for them to come to. And you saw in the video, even though it was quick, the Civil Rights Institute of Birmingham sees over 150,000 people per year. The Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery has seen over 1 million visitors since they opened in 2000. We believe that's possible in Tuscaloosa. We believe that the stories we have to tell can attract those kinds of numbers. And 60,000, I think, is a reasonable number after we get up and running. We've done some preliminary looking at what it would take to build a museum. What you see on the screen is a rendering of what we could do with the old jail in terms of wrapping a new building around it, preserving the old building and turning that into a learning center and a museum. Think about the idea of people going to the Savings Center one day and kids coming up the hill to the Capitol Park and then going to this museum. It's a natural fit. It fits right in with what we're trying to do here in terms of telling this story. We're already partnering with a lot of people. As I said, the school district, not too long ago, we had Lee Centel, the director of the Alabama Department of Tourism, was here in town. We gave him a tour, gave him firsthand understanding of what we were doing. We're doing the Bloody Tuesday commemoration on a regular basis. We're building bridges with the Ollie group on campus at the university, and each year we do the Tuscaloosa Heritage Festival. So we're building relationships that will help us promote the trail and promote what we're doing. The other thing that I think is important, and you guys have already been a part of this, is that a few years ago, Reverend Linton's Barbershop, if you've ever been there, was a museum unto itself. Reverend Linton passed, and the city was kind enough or wise enough to acquire that property, but not only did they acquire the property, they also acquired the content of that building. And so for the last several months, the foundation has been going through and inventorying all of the content. And so I'm happy to say that right now we have over 2,500 items that we've inventoried that came out of there. If you walked in there, it was like going back in time, because he had civil rights information. He had old information about barbershops. He had shaving mugs and spittoons that he collected for the last 50 years. One of the things that I found most interesting, you see on the screen there, he literally had a poll tax receipt from 1958. That's not something you see. And that's the kind of history we don't want to get to be lost when we start looking at our story. The other thing that was important to us is to be able to capture the stories of these foot soldiers. So as we were talking to people about what was going on in Tuscaloosa, one of the things we started to do 5 years ago was to go out and interview a lot of these foot soldiers, record their stories so we could have those in the future. Several of them have passed away, but we still have a number of those foot soldiers that are currently working with us and on occasion are able to come out and talk to us about what's going on. Over the last year and a half, 2 years, in spite of COVID, we have had international journalists from Germany, Spain, Canada, Mexico, to come and visit Tuscaloosa on a civil rights tour. As I mentioned, we had Lee Centel come into town. Most recently, back in the spring, we were able to present what we're doing to over 400 University of Alabama students who are working on a diversity program. We've spoken to the Rotary Club, the Junior League, the University of Alabama trustees, the power company pioneers, the Chamber of Commerce, just to name a few. So we're out doing what we can to raise the awareness about Tuscaloosa and our civil rights story. We can't do it alone, and we know that. So we've been working with city schools, we've been working with Stillman, we have a memorandum of understanding with the tourism board here, Sports and Tourism, where they've been a great help in helping us to get this story told. But more importantly, what we're trying to do is to find a way to expand our capabilities. So we're asking this group to consider $150,000 investment in the foundation so we can expand what we're doing, expand the trail, get more staffing in place, but also to be able to attract more groups specifically around civil rights. And that was one of the things that we heard loud and clear, especially from talking to Lee Centel. He's written a book on civil rights trails across the country. And part of what he had to say is, you've got to make sure people hear your story, see your story. And the way to do that is to make sure you're out there in front of the public on a regular basis. So we need to have more people out there on the street telling the story. But we also need to be able, whenever there's an event going on in Tuscaloosa, people need to see this brochure. People need to be told about it. We need people out there helping to share the story. But that's what we're all about, is making sure that we can tell this story, because we believe civil rights is a story that needs to be told, but we also believe it is a wonderful way to attract and get people to stay in Tuscaloosa longer if they've got something to visit. I recently Googled museums in Tuscaloosa. I only found a handful. So having another museum, having a digital learning center where people can come in and stay, and having a place where we can have meetings and conferences is another reason to keep people in Tuscaloosa. And you know, if we keep them in Tuscaloosa, they're gonna spend money at restaurants and other places. So we see this as an economic driver, as a way to bring in new tourists, not just for football, but for something else. If they come for football, great, but how about if they stay a couple of extra days and visit one of these sites that we're looking to develop? So our goal, expand the trail, planning for a new museum, and planning for a memorial that recognizes civil rights icons and Black businesses and other businesses that have been a part of the civil rights struggle for the last several years. I could talk more and more, but I know you guys are tired because it's been a long day and you've heard a lot of presentations, but I would like to answer any questions. We think that what we have is a great program, and we've invested several years building it, but we're not where we need to be. We're not going to be to the point where we can attract those 60,000 tourists until we have a building, until we have, you know, that learning center in place. So we're at step one of moving in that direction. But let me stop right there and first of all, thank you for your time. And then
Thank you for yours. Very good presentation.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Have y'all got, I know you've got a drawing of what your museum would look like, but have you gotten beyond that? You know, have any idea what it would cost or anything like that?
We don't. Part of what we were looking at, and we've been talking to several people, the mayor and other people, about taking and converting the old jail.
Right.
It had some asbestos issues that we've got to deal with first. So
Sure.
we're still not at that point. The old Linton Barbershop property, we had some issues there, so we're still doing the legwork to figure out what it would cost. So no, we don't have a number yet. The rendering I showed you is just our first look to see what could be done. At some point, hopefully this year, we'll be able to put some of those things on paper.
Having been on that tour, the foot soldier story, as you mentioned, is just compelling. And I grew up in that era, but I grew up on the other side of town. And so it was a little different, but I appreciated the opportunity to go on a tour recently.
Well, I appreciate that. Last week, I gave a tour I did along with Dr. Gigi to the leadership of Pfeiffer. And one of the gentlemen on the tour said, you know, I grew up in Tuscaloosa. I knew Robert Shelton, but I had no idea as to who he was.
Right.
You know, he says, it just never crossed my mind. And most people, even people who live in Tuscaloosa, have no idea about the history of the Austin building. The Austin building was the headquarters of the Klan for a number of years, and people don't know that. But they also don't know the story of Maxie Thomas, who was one of those people who was beaten on Bloody Tuesday, almost lost an eye, but who's still around, who's telling that story to young people. And he was one of the pictures I just showed you of the young man, and someone with his hand on his shoulder with the gray hair. That's Maxie Thomas. And he and his wife had a record shop downtown. They did a whole lot of stuff. But Maxie's still here, and he's still telling that story. Harrison Taylor, you all know Harrison Taylor. He tells some amazing stories about the things that happened during that era. Other questions? Well,
I want to ask one quick question. But long term, the facility would have exhibits and would kind of bring a lot of that to life in some way for the tourism aspect of it, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
that's the vision.
The vision, yes, is to have
Yeah.
a museum that has all of these artifacts in there. But not only that, we don't want it to be a sort of a stagnant place. We want it to be an active place. So we have a museum, but we also have this learning center so that you can actually have classes and do lectures and
More interactive.
more interactive.
Yeah.
But we also want to put technology into this museum. And if you've ever been to Montgomery to see the Legacy Museum, or some other places where technology is infused in telling the story. So that's a part of what we're working on, is not just the building, but how do we engage people? Because the younger generation that we need to reach, they're not about reading what's on the wall. They're about touching stuff and interacting stuff. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking ahead, so that when we do build this, we're building it for something that's not.
The Birmingham Museum is pretty awesome. I mean, I know it's not what you're saying, but the one in Birmingham is awesome.
It is, and I can say this, when that museum was built, I put the first technology in there.
Is that right?
And now I'm in the process of helping them reimagine what it needs to look like for the next 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm excited about what's happening when it comes to civil rights, not just here in Tuscaloosa, but we need to build up the whole civil rights tourism part of the state. Because when people come, I'll say this and I'll be through. Right now, when people come to Alabama, they go to Birmingham, they go to Selma, they go to Montgomery. They don't come to Tuscaloosa. And we want to change that. And we're starting to change that. That group of international journalists, they came to Tuscaloosa. They went to Birmingham, they came to Tuscaloosa, then they went to Selma, and they went to Montgomery. Why? Because we've been working with the Department of Tourism and they said, look, if you're coming to Alabama, you need to go see what's in Tuscaloosa. And they left here impressed. We have a story to tell, and it's a story that hadn't been told, and it's a unique story, but we're excited about telling it. Another question?
No, I think we're coming up on time, but it was a good presentation. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Good to see everybody.
See, we have one presentation left, and it is West Alabama Food Bank. So, let's see, Gene, and you're gonna have to give me some. Rikachevsky and David Popin,
David Poppin.
welcome.
Thank you. Honorable Council, please thank you, please appreciate we appreciate being here with you today. I'll get myself going here in a minute. It's interesting, it's really kind of fun to listen to what's going on in this community. And we're excited to share what's going on with the food bank. Now, we've had the opportunity to meet with you all, I believe it was back in June, if not May. Had some time to talk with Councilor Tyner earlier in the year, and also not too long ago, Councilor Howard had a chance to actually tour not only the existing facility in Northport, but our new intended home in Tuscaloosa, since we're moving it into her district. We've actually shown you a good portion of this presentation when we came a few months ago. We've updated it. We certainly submit it for your further review. We're gonna, in the interest of time and really focusing on what we think are some of the newer developments in our project, we're gonna jump to those areas. So imagine West Alabama. That's the moniker that we developed on behalf of the West Alabama Food Bank. It's a 5-year plan, and in our imagination, we see a 9-county region that we serve substantially improving on its food insecurity rates. We have some of the highest communities in the state in terms of food insecurity, and there's been a lot of work put in place by Gene, our wonderful 14-member board, our thousands of volunteers and partners to put together this plan. And if I could, I want to jump real quick, and if you recall, in our last meeting, we gave you all a detailed packet of information, and in there was a case statement so we did not want to burden you with that, but I wanted to just show you an overall view of our $10 million plan. It's bold, it's realistic, We also believe it's financially viable, and it's generational. This plan and the results of what this plan will do over the next 5 years literally will position our community to be able to service our food insecure for the balance of our lifetimes. And what's been really encouraging about this project, I've had the good fortune since late last fall of going throughout the 9-county area, meeting with civic leaders like yourselves, business leaders, families, children, seniors, and to a person, nobody would deny the importance of making sure that our neighbors are not going hungry, that our children, our seniors are taken care of. What's also interesting though about this project is that it does have a tremendous economic development aspect, that as the more we share that detail, it's picking up steam. Gene and I yesterday morning was with the Lamar County Commission. They invited us up. We sat down over breakfast and shared the plan, and we saw the excitement of what we're doing in their eyes. We're meeting with all the counties. We're meeting with a good number of the cities, and a whole host of other businesses. It's a $10 million plan that at its heart is about developing a new site, a new location, the Buffalo Rock facility. If you go by there now, you'll see that the concrete pad and the infrastructure for the steel has been put in place for the $1.8 million, 11,000 square foot new cooler and freezer facility. That's the major renovation, the cooler and freezer. There's an additional $1 million to $1.3 million that will be done within the 55,000 square foot existing space. Mostly equipment, conveyor belts, some lighting, some ramp work, things of that nature. But Councilor Howard, if she was here, would tell you that the building is perfect in so many ways for our needs. And so there's not a tremendous amount of internal renovation. The roof is good, the pavement outside is good, etc. But in addition to expanding the building, we're also going to be expanding staffing capacity. Gene's going to talk about a moment on some of our critical programs and specifically how they're impacting residents of Tuscaloosa, the city of Tuscaloosa. We intend on leading harder over the next 5 years into the programs that are working. We intend on adding some new programs that we know we need, that we know that can be effective, but quite frankly, for the lack of physical space, we've not been able to launch to this point in time, but we will beginning in 2023. And we are also looking at some equipment needs that we need to go with it. So we've got operational enhancements, program enhancements, as well as the facility enhancement. So it's really a soup to nuts thought through plan. And we did our pro forma. When we get this facility built, we get the staff hired, we get the equipment purchased, and we increase our capacity in the first 3 to 5 years by 25 to 30% more than what we're doing right now. We will pretty much be operating at a cost that we are able to accommodate right now with our current operations. So we're not building something and aspiring to something that's really putting the organization in financial jeopardy. With that being said, we have a great board of directors. A good number of them are part of our campaign team. We've had others join. And what I'm really proud about, this is not a finished product. We've got a number of leaders, corporate leaders and civic leaders that we're still meeting with. But our hope is by the end of this month, we'll have finalized our team. But we've got representation from the city of Fayette to Sumter County, of course to our great city here in Tuscaloosa, the county overall, and then we've got a number of business folks, retired academia, active academia. It's a pretty impressive group of people. I can tell you, my job is a fundraiser. I spend every day going out into the community, oftentimes on an island, asking for money. Nobody, to this point in time, has turned us down. Now, maybe not given us the amount we've asked for, but turned us down. Now we've made almost 50 solicitations at this point. and we've been calculated the first 6-7 months of the year by design. But I can tell you that in the 30 years that I've done this work, that has never been made close to the case. So we're excited about how this project is now starting to translate into the community. And with that being said, I'm gonna jump back a little bit and ask Ms. Jean to talk about, oops.
Can I ask before, because time is not unlimited, and since before we go to Eugene, can we talk some about the capital piece of this?
Yes.
Y'all have already bought the building, right?
We have purchased the building and sold the existing building
Okay.
for a net gain of $1.5 million. So that'll be part.
So
So
you
we sold our property. And
sold your
that's
property, you bought the new one, and you got $1.5 million left over.
No,
You said for a net gain of
not the
$1 million.
net gain.
Yeah, that's my
The
mistake.
1.5 million is what I got for the property. I put that in to pay for the thing, and then we're financing the rest of it and paying it off with the capital campaign.
And what did you pay for and what's financed?
About a little over 2 million.
Is financed?
It's financed. And then we're adding the $1.8 million cooler and freezer.
Okay, and then according to this, West Avon Food Bank will contribute $5 million towards the plan
Right,
with
we are
funds
paying for the
it
1.8.
currently holds in reserve.
Right, I've been using that because I had to pay out the cooler and freezer to start construction and buy the equipment. So almost 2 million of that is gone, so that leaves us some money left over to continue operations of, until we can recoup some of the money, buying new racks to put into the facilities so we can store the food, buying some of the things that we need to be able to utilize the food. So we are financing that ourselves.
So let me, if I could, because the numbers, they do make sense, but they can be a little confusing.
Okay.
So when we purchased the Buffalo Rock site for $3.25 million, we actually had $1 million of funding in reserve that the organization was able to acquire over the last several years mostly to the generosity of donors during the pandemic years. We put that $1 million down, we financed the balance at about $2 million plus at a very low interest rate, and then about 30 days later, we sold the property for $1.5 million, our existing property. And so we're gonna carry that note of $2 million at the 3.5% interest rate. And now we've got the $1.5 million for the facility that we sold, the building. We were able then to use half of that money, or about half of that money, to put the first 50% down on the cooler freezer. So really to this point in time, between property flip and launching the cooler and freezer, we've been able to self-fund.
Okay.
The overall macro perspective is that in addition to the $5 million that we plan to raise over the 5-year period of time, there is about $5 million in total value that the organization will self-contribute, if you will. Now, some of these items within the budget, if I can go back here, some of these operating enhancements, these would typically just fall under the annual operating budget of the organization over the next 5 years. So we wanted to pull them forward and present them as part of the 5-year plan, because you really can't show a facility expansion of this caliber without showing the commitment towards the operational expansion. So when we say it's self-funded, it's generally the operating dollars that the organization will be generating on an annual basis beyond the capital campaign. If that makes sense. So the $1.5 million for operating enhancement, the $1 million for emergency food, those are dollars that the organization we project will generate over the next 5 years through its operation. And we wanted to make sure that it was part of this plan. That makes sense?
It may. The weak link may be my brain at this point in the day.
Think of another.
Hang on one second,
Yeah.
please. West Avon Food Bank will contribute $5 million towards the plan with funds it currently holds in reserve.
In
Y'all
reserve.
got $5 million in reserves?
Yeah, so that statement is assuming that, no, No, we do not have 5 million in reserve. We have roughly, if you go back in time until we purchased the property, let's say we had about 2.5 in reserve. And let's say 3.5. Because we've got $2 million in cash that the organization was able to generate the last 5 years, the majority of which the last couple of years, and then the 1.5 proceed from the sale. The balance, the additional $1.5 million, there's an assumption there that that will be generated. And so, for example, about a third of that has already been generated. The organization is likely to get a substantial grant through ARPA funds that was made to ADECA and then made in gross to the Association for Food Banks in the state of Alabama. The association, therefore, is going to then earmark more than likely $400,000. Was that the number? We're still waiting for that to be
We don't have
finalized,
it
but it's a
finalized.
substantial sum of money. It'll be a pro rata amount that'll come to us as they give out the rest of the funds to other food banks. That funding will go towards the plan, but it cannot be counted towards the capital campaign, to the 5 million. So there is fundraising and there's resource development that we're doing that is part of the 10 million, but to present it fairly, we're saying it's not part of the $5 million philanthropic campaign. It's funds in reserve.
Okay, so the capital campaign, is it called capital? Imagine West Alabama,
It's a capital campaign
it's capital campaign, so it
for
says.
$5 million.
It's
Expected
a
to
capital plan for 10 million with a fundraising
Okay.
campaign for 5, yeah.
So expected to conclude in September of '22, that's next month. Where are you in this?
Yeah, so the plan itself is a 5-year plan. That will grow up until the balance of 2026, even into early 2027. The fundraising campaign, when we launched it in December, we optimistically viewed that we'd be able to finish that up by the end of September. It's now looking like we're gonna need through the balance of this calendar year, and maybe even a little bit into next year. But for all intents and purposes, we've raised almost $1.2 million from 24 investors. We have another 22 or 3 investors that we've approached and made solicitation and are waiting on decision. Of course, the city and the county being 2 of our larger public entities. And so when we began the process, as we've understood and moved along, we've realized that some of our critical decision-making won't be happening until the month of September. So we won't go public with a kickoff event more than likely till October, and then we'll finish the balance of the fundraising in the several months thereafter. I would say right now of the 5 million, I can see 3 from what we've solicited so far. And I definitely feel that we've got the capacity in the balance of our campaign target for the additional 2. So we're very bullish on ultimately the campaign getting there.
So do we want to pick up now with the
Okay,
operational
and I was
side?
also gonna tell you, we've met with Congresswoman Sill, who's also trying to reach out and find some federal money to add back into this program, since it is the area to serve, and that is one of their buttons that they're trying to ignite of food security.
So if we could move out to the macro level, I gotta start by confessing my ignorance.
Sure.
The term food
Insecurity.
insecurity, what is
So
that?
basically, food insecurity is for a family not to have enough nutritional food to sustain themselves, having 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day, whatever they choose, every day to meet basic health needs. So we have families, I can give you an example of today. We had a father who brought 1 child with him. He had 3 more at home and his wife. They had no food in the house. They were on the verge of getting evicted. They didn't know how they were gonna eat that night. He barely had enough gas money to get to us and didn't know what to do. When somebody comes to us, and we're usually the first stop, and then we have 97 agencies that we also support, like the Phoenix House, Lyft, all those other places, the Soup Kitchen, Salvation Army, they all get their food from us. So after we get with them,
Do they buy it from you?
So they do not buy it from us. They pay a shared handling fee, which is what the federal government sets as 18 cents a pound. And not all of it is 18 cents a pound. When we give it to a person, it is free. When we're giving produce, it is free. What we're doing is we're buying food, we're recovering food from grocery stores. I can tell you right now, we are about to get a ton of Oreos that have American flags on them with red icing. They were great during 4th of July, but now they're over because now they're bringing in Halloween orange Oreos with something else on it. So we will recover that. We just had our back to school event where at the end of the back to school, all the stores, Walmart, Target, all the grocery stores will send us all their back to school stuff. They don't want it in their store anymore. We will save that until next year. So now we saved that from when they sent it to us last September. We brought it in, and then last Friday, we let all of our agencies come in and get school supplies for their programs if their programs served children.
Okay.
So that's how we operate. The 18 cents a pound is kind of a sliding scale because sometimes we charge it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes to start people off, we give it to them. Sometimes we just need to move something and it's at no cost. But that is what the federal.
In Bill's budget, when they're showing $54,000 for food for these afternoon
Right.
or early evening kids, they're buying that from you.
They're paying this. They would pay the shared handling fee.
They're just getting theirs from somebody else, I guess.
Right. They're probably going to Sam's, but
So-
but we will reach out to them and say, hey, you can be part of us.
This is
you
where we
know
could
that.
drive, this is where we drive synergy. They could come to the food bank.
So that's where that's where, and then also we can provide an extra benefit to them because we are going to have a teaching kitchen, a demonstration kitchen where they can come and learn how to cook meals and learn how to do stuff because that is a huge component, as you heard from them, that is missing in our society today.
Gene, if I could add something.
Well, we're gonna be pushing up on
Sure we are.
time here, so
Yeah.
I wanna make sure you get your
Sure.
time.
I was just
to
gonna
do
say,
the-
to just give you some flat numbers, 737,000 pounds of food was distributed in the 2021 year in the city of Tuscaloosa. We had over 1,700 served by just us, not any of our partner agencies, just us, 1,700 unduplicated families. Out of that, we had children who are in the city school systems that we're providing weekend meals for. We're providing 380 seniors a monthly box to keep them food secure. We work with the Good Samaritan to provide food for the people who are coming to the clinic who might have dietary needs. So we provide food to all these other agencies. We're a giant warehouse. Instead of car parts, we're food.
And do we have any way, or do you have any way of, for us, focusing in on that so that we know what part of that clientele that you serve is city of Tuscaloosa?
Those are all city of Tuscaloosa numbers.
So all
Because I just pulled out the zip
all
codes.
1,700 families you showed.
I just pulled, it's more than
I'm
1,500, but
challenging,
yes. I just pulled out the zip codes.
And I tell you what, Lee, one of the things that,
Okay, but that's the question I
Yeah.
want to answer.
Yeah,
So
this is
Yeah.
super conservative,
1,700
super
families.
conservative, because
that's
this is,
one thing
these are
I,
only trackable direct service.
and I asked that too, and one of the things that's so tragic is that we haven't contributed to this group before because they have been in Northport, yet they've been feeding our kids, and that's not right.
So we do, we keep your kids off the street because we prevent mothers and parents from either having to steal or prostitute themselves out or sell drugs to provide food, because parents will provide food for the children.
Regardless. And I just want to say this, because I do support them and they're moving to my district and I'm going to be quick, but like just for instance with the secret meals, that's something that I provide through this, to the students in the schools. So like when we have a holiday coming up, the parents are adamant about making sure that the students get those secret meals, and it's really like a secret meal that comes with cereal and mac and cheese, things you can pop in a microwave or things that the kids can fix themselves, but you put it in their backpacks and that helps them get to from Friday to Monday.
Entire weekend.
Just an entire weekend, and that's very important. Like sometimes it might look like things that you and I won't eat, but the students are adamant about getting their meals. You also do, like a family of 6, because I help with benefits. A family of 6 might get $1,200 in food stamps a month. But for that family of 6, and with groceries being as high as they are, that $1,200 is not stretched as far as you would think it does. So they have to supplement by going to the food bank or making sure that their students get secret meals. So what the West Alabama Food Bank does is very much, it touches so many families, not just here in the city of Tuscaloosa, even though I'm most concerned about that, but it touches very many families throughout our school system and our community. Churches depend on it, so many different families, and there's so many needs, especially with prices being as they are. It's almost impossible for a low-income family to make it without this type of supplement in their life.
That's true.
Right.
And if there's nothing else that I can share with you as a consultant that does this all over the country, here's what's amazing about this operation. So 80% of the food that's being brought into our community, the 9-county community, 80% roughly, is coming from outside of our community. We are importing that revenue, that cash, if you will, into our community. A good portion of that is through USDA. They're bringing the trucks in from out of state, they're going to Montgomery, we're going back and forth and bringing them here. Yes, there's recovery programs, we are directly purchasing food, but the vast majority of the sourcing of the food is coming from outside. That is roughly about $10 million a year of value that's being brought in and distributed to our citizens. So when you think about actually growing this, not only is it growing the ability to serve people that are hungry, but we're driving more revenue, more value into our area economy that allows then people to make those choices of, say, we now have food so we can pay our rent, we can get our medical bills taken care of. We estimate with this new facility, in the first 5 years alone, that we will do 25% more food over a 5-year period than the last 5 years. And the last 5 years was 3 times the amount of the previous 5 years. That will translate to Tuscaloosa, to the city, roughly about 4.65 million pounds of food directly given to our residents. That doesn't include all the indirect action that's happening. That'll have a value of about $8 million. So we're asking the city to think about a $250,000 investment over a 5-year period. That's a 32 times return on your investment, non-duplicative. That's a heck of a
And
return.
I know we're not discussing that today, but that's what I had proposed to the mayor. And I had
Okay.
spoken with Mr. Busby about that as well, about why, because we've done this before, like for Easter seals and some other organizations where we do a $50,000 a year for 3 years or 4 years. We've done this before,
Right.
and that's what I'm proposing. Whether we'll get the 4 votes or not, I'm not sure, but I hope so.
And here's where I think also is very valuable.
We're approaching
Yeah, we
the
are.
conclusion.
This is the conclusion. So what's really neat about this project, I think, as somebody who does this professionally, the vast majority of the funding will come from the private sector. A lot of it through philanthropy, because even when you look at the $5 million of self-funding, a significant percentage of that money is coming through philanthropy. The organization is very talented in generating revenue. We have donors from all over the country that are sending us money. But what I know for sure is that when the city and the county and the other municipalities in our 9 counties take an active share, it doesn't have to be the largest amounts, that has a very positive, persuasive impact on the philanthropic community. And so the city's investment not only generates that return in terms of food, but it will have a long, very powerful impact on the fundraising that we're able to do. Because they resonate. People look at what the city's decisions are and they follow it. So I would make that point. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all, good to see you again.
Tell me
All right,
again what you're.
I don't know that there's any adjournment necessary because it's not, there is, we're still finance. All right, would a finance member like to make a motion to adjourn?
I would.
Is there a second from a finance member? All in favor, say